Let's start with the basics and how I start. Usually, it depends on what kind of mix it is. At this stage, I would probably have uploaded all the parts and discovered the BPM. And actually, I should probably start from scratch with. I have a mix I haven't started on yet. So here are all the parts. Add all. And then we have this classic TDM problem. We can't use interleaved files. It's got to be left and right. So I usually start on in the native section. I have no idea what these guys are.
So this is first time you've opened these up?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
That's the bass line. And if you don't have a mix, you need to find something that we could probably use that to figure out the BPM. Okay, let's see. That's a good BPM thing. So what we'll do is we'll start with a bar.
Chopping that bar?
Yeah. You gotta be really careful. You find a waveform, for instance this guy, he looks, and then you try to find the corresponding one in the end of the bar. And I have these quick commands, 1 and 2.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. See, if you do that, you see it's exactly the same. So that's one bar, and then in Logic what you do is you highlight one bar and have a key command which is adjust tempo to locators globally, and it's 129.99. It's a pretty fair guess that it's 130 actually. I always there's a reason why a lot of mixers these days use 128, and now I'm going to tell you the secret. Some guys will be pissed off. It's a CD called Vengeance Essential, you know, the house loops, and they're all 128, and we're so lazy that if you want to do 127, it's really hard to preview. So what you do is you start at 128. You might, you know, if you have your kit together, you might want to stretch it, but you know, it's easier to stay, especially for remixes, press for time. So this one, I have no idea what tempo is, but I found a part here it's got a kick drum in it. So what I'll do is I'll cut out one bar. Oops, I had a looping point there. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I blow it up and I try to find a curve, something that looks, I think that guy looks pretty, it's easy to spot. And I have a quick command set, so 1 is the beginning and 2 is the end of the sample. Then we'll blow it up a little bit extra. The more precise you are, and then you do the 1, 2 thing, you see the waveform looks exactly the same in the beginning and the end. Then you know you definitely got one bar. And in Logic what you do is you highlight one bar, and you can set a key command. It's called adjust tempo to length and locators, and it's A on my setup. You press that, and then it asks you if you want to do it globally. Yes, and here's the tempo. So it's 129.99. Fairly big chance that's 130. I know he uses Cubase, so sometimes there's a little bit of difference between PC and Mac, believe it or not, but most of the time it's pretty accurate. Okay, so we got the tempo, and we can get rid of that little piece. And this one is it's an instrumental track by Chris Kayser, French guy. And he's got some mad ideas, and I absolutely love this track. I don't really know what to do with it, but it was quite, the intro is really minimal and it sort of grows, so okay, let's pick the bass line. So let's use one of the bass lines. Starting position. Okay, so we figured out the BPM. The next thing I do is I usually use 2 or 3 kicks on my mixes. One for the decay, like a really fat one, and one for the click, and if I need, you know, one for the more top end, you know, like to give it that little push. And for simplicity's sake, we'll just go to mix I did not too long ago. And it pays off to be organized, everything is labeled properly, so you just go for the kick. And the kick DP is kick deep. And this is another reason why it's great to work with the same tempo, because it's already there. It's 8 bars. Coming from Notator, you know, I'm used to working. Oh yeah, it's 130. Shit. So we have to stretch it. But let's actually do the drums first anyway. Since it's 130, we can use one kick to start with. This is the deep one. And I used to use sampler, EXS24 or sample cell before then. But I realized it's just such a waste of time to sit here and program a kick like that for 8 bars or 1 and copy. So I usually program in the audio straight. And then let's see, where's the other kick? Didn't get the other kick. You can of course preview here. This one is a live kick that sometimes when we get more rocky projects, you get great live sounds with overhead, and it's really interesting. And they're great to use with house as well, because you get that sort of cuts through. Then, so this is the deep one, and this is the more woody one. But I think that there's quite a lot of sub bass on this one, so you always have to roll off a little bit. And my main EQ is this Focusrite one, mainly because I'm so used to the interface. Maybe give it a little push here in the mid. I mean, I think the Logic channel EQ is really good too. It's just a bit confusing, because if you don't get the exact point, you get a new one, so you get 2 waves, and it's really hard to find. So I think this one is. And we're gonna stretch it down, but we can start. Actually, maybe I should do a mix in 130 for a change. Okay. Now we're gonna figure out if we bounce these parts in time. Oh, solo. Yeah, it's pretty much in time. So what I'll do is I just line up the original idea. Oh, we're gonna need some. Hey, this guy's funny, you know. He never sends dry parts. He just bounces it, and he doesn't care if you know, if it's an ending like reverb. He just cuts in the middle of the reverb. That's the way he produces. He produces his sounds. He like creates his samples, and then he creates the song as it was sampled. But he plays everything, so nothing is sampled from old records. So it's a lot of fun. Let's see. Select unused.
So at this point you still don't really know where you're going to take the track? It's just kind of...
No, this particular track I played a lot. So, and it's so good, you know. I told him I love it as it is, so I don't know what to do. But I'll play around. put up all the parts and see if there's something that, you know, I'll probably cut up the bass line, change it a little bit maybe, or add another musical element. And there's no vocal, so I might have to find a sample, something to give it a little bit of a different vibe. But at this point it's more about checking where the parts are, if everything is tight, and sometimes it's a bit sloppy. I know that it's all done in a computer, there's no live stuff, but I don't trust anyone or anything, so I usually cut everything up anyway, just to check that everything is... Because if you've done it once, then you know that one is tight, so I can forget about it. It's all about EQ and levels, really. What I do is, in this stage, if I want, this is just a kick drum, and I don't know what kind of swing I want, so I usually hit the decks and I play some favorite tunes and, you know, different beats. I sync it to what I hear, and when I find something really good, I record it. So what we'll do, I usually remember something that was great in the weekend. This is really good when you haven't got a clue what you're gonna do. Let's try that one. You get an instant vibe here. Pretty good. I mean, this bass line is a bit too funky for tribal, but just for simplicity's sake, let's use that one. Then we'll get in here. And this is where you need to make sure that everything is panned. I still record really loud because I imagine you lose resolution. But I read recently, maybe in your magazine actually, that that's like a myth now. On 24-bit you don't really have to, you can sort of record it really low actually. And then put it in record. Now it's already pitched, so it's in the right tempo. So I don't need to stretch it, because even though you can't hear it, it does degrade the sound a lot, I think. It's better to pitch it manually and record it analog. Gotta wait until the big percussion thing comes in. Okay. And now, because we don't want to take things straight like it is, we need to cut it up. And I still have my kicks. I haven't glued them yet because I might want to do tricks, different programmings. So I'll just stick the again. Pay attention to that stuff. It always fascinates me that so even though I had it in time up there, it always seems to get out of time. But because I don't trust MIDI or anyone, I always cut it up into really small chunks, and I'll choose, actually I shouldn't have done that. That's fine. Basically the same over and over. So that's one vibe. It's the basic, the intro vibe, so to speak. It's not really clean there. Okay, so this is not, it's a lot of effects and stuff hanging out there, so it's basically two pieces. It's one that's a little bit less and one that gets a bit busier. And then what I usually do is cut it up. It's a bit sloppy there. Oops. It's a bit too fast. Because this is something you do once and then it's done. The next thing is that maybe I don't want to use the same swing. I don't know what this guy used, so I'll cut it up. These two are basically the same, so I can something that's flamming a little bit.
You're a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to
definitely
fundamentals.
But you do it now, and this one, you could swing this one. This is the garang thing, and having done work with Logic so long, I know that the different parameters. B is, for instance, 21. If I delay that one, you get a 21. But then I know it's 21. So every other thing I program hi-hats, I will use 16B. or if I want more swing, but it's a bit early to decide that now because I don't know where I'm gonna go. So I'll probably keep it straight, but I can exaggerate. I can use D, for instance. Then you hear it's really swinging, but that will I will get stuck in that swing. Everything has to be choppy and really swingy. The straighter it is, the faster it will feel. So it depends on, if I have a really straight bass line, I might want to swing the drums. But if I have a really funky bass line, I might want to have straight. So what I usually do is I leave it straight to begin with. And the next thing is way too much bass here. So sometimes it's cool to have a little bit of kick there. But it's a lot of singing in the, it's a tom, boom, boom. And it's actually key in there, and if it's not in the right key, it will drag the whole track. So I'll probably just use the percussion like that. And you can go overboard. I hear that there's a little swing in that percussion, so I might have to cut it up even more and adjust that as well. But we can leave it like that for now. Now it's my kick. I decide how much bass I want in the drums. Because that's always a problem if you use a loop. It's really hard to get the mix right with the original bass. You gotta be in charge of that yourself. And then you can do other interesting things. Maybe I don't want to do a tribal mix. I just get rid of the... So
have you done that? Have you got just...
I just muted the swing a bit. And that's the great thing when you cut it up into pieces. Maybe you don't want maybe you want to move that to a more traditional funky house position, which would be. So you can change the whole vibe in the loop. Or maybe actually get rid of the kick. Depends on what I want. If it's a background thing, it might be better to get rid of all the kicks and claps and put your own instead. So I sometimes, maybe I will only use the sort of the tribal fill. Sometimes I end up using just a little bit of the loop. I never use a loop, and I always cut it up because you never know how they programmed it, or maybe they sampled another record that was out of time and you get that dragging feeling. And because if you do it in the beginning, you never have to worry about it later. Once you're happy with what you sampled, you just copy. I always do everything in 8-bar sections. So that's one, and then we had this other guy, which was the sort of the intro vibe of the record we sampled. I've been on tour for 10 days, I'm a bit rusty today. Okay. Same thing. This is basically just a conga. it's not the tribal element is not as pronounced. So this one is a really good background vibe. And again, you have to cut everything up. You can see this was probably I didn't spend enough time making it perfect up there, but and this is what I find a bit dangerous with EXS24 when you buy these sample CDs, because you never know how they did them, you know, and how organized. Those Vengeance House guys are really tight, you know, they're usually spot on. But when you record them on disc, you can notice that something is a bit out of time, you know, like a swingy thing. And the more stuff you put in the mix, you know, you kind of build up on that little mistake. You can't tell what it is, but something is dragging, or so that's why I always feel it's better to do it now in the early stages. Double check that the endings are okay as well. There's a great trick I'm going to show here in a second. So you see in this loop there's a lot of this is typical decay from a kick, these waveforms here, and if you cut in the middle you get a little click, and sometimes you don't hear it, but at one point you will probably hear it in a breakdown or something. And to get rid of those, it's the best way is to do a short fade, maybe 5 milliseconds, something like that, and you do that on all the endings. The easiest way is probably just to the best way to hear it is to mute every other. Hear that little thing? That might be a problem later. It's a typical some little ship. They probably sampled a snare with the beginning of the next hi-hat. This little thing here. It's a little conga. And the beauty is that you can actually get rid of that if you want by redrawing the waveform a little bit. Probably a better idea to make a copy first, but let's try, just because it's fun. You can draw that thing out. Beautiful, huh? it takes a couple of times for it to. At least the little distortion thing disappeared. I don't know why it takes, I think it caches the sound, and it takes a couple of times before it disappears. Now it's almost gone. I mean, you can go overboard here, you can redraw all these little distortion things you can sort of redraw, but sometimes when you do too much, you know, you lose the vibe, you know, and the sound starts, the treble starts to go. But you probably won't hear that now. Now we can make this one, say it's yellow. So this is the intro vibe of that other record. Because at this stage we don't really know what we're gonna do. So So we have this vibe. Actually, let's put the whole thing in. Something really wrong with that one. Oh, I see what it is now. So we got a loop, the one we took from the CD, and it's all cut up. And the next step is you always need, as a rock and roll producer actually taught me way back in the beginning of my career, that you need a closed hi-hat, sort of to keep, something's got to be stabilizing the whole thing. I always use an 808, like a sample. And I still haven't decided where I want to go. I mean, it can be like this. And basically, you don't really need it loud, just like that. And you notice without it and with it, it's just massive difference because it gives a little treble on each sound. So you don't have to EQ the shit out of snares and kicks, you know, to get the click. It's better to put a little higher there. And then later you can of course decide you want to go 16ths. And if you want to swing it, this is the real benefit with Logic, because after years of programming you start to learn the parameters. So the swingy ones are this guy and that guy, and I move them manually. For instance, if I want D swing, I put them on 61. It's not as cool as in Reason, I have to admit, you know, with that new groove thing, but it's fairly easy. Or this is the lowest swing we got in Logic, which is B, 16B. But for now, let's keep it straight. And then while you're at it, you can add an open one. And this is the real benefit with programming audio straight in the arrange window. You can cut it up, for instance, here, like make it small parts. Let's just loop these two beats here. If you want to do a little funky thing like that, then you can experiment on the fly, make it shorter. Or if you want to swing it. And I find that you can make really, I mean, as a programmer, it's really hard to sort of come up with these patterns. And you can't vary the lengths as you can do with live audio, so to speak. And you can even decide that this guy needs to be really short. Just cut that. You can try all kinds of random stuff here. And sometimes even an accident, as we discussed yesterday. You might just put it completely wrong and it becomes this really new cool groove. But okay, we can settle for the simple, you know, sort of treble enhancing function, which is straight 8 like that. And then we might want to add a bigger loop, you know, from the XS24. And it sounds really, it's a bit too busy. So here we can apply the sidechain technique, which is really cool. Basically you stick a compressor on the whole loop. This is the whole thing, and the more threshold you give, the less of the kick and clap you get. You can go really extreme and just get the hi-hat and a little bit of a vibe. And it's not the same as editing out the hi-hat, because you do get that little. And then because it's some heavy processing going on, you might want to filter it. And you hear this really nasty treble. that's when you apply a de-esser, which is really made for vocals. And you see, all that nasty shit goes away, and you get a really soft, sort of almost American sounding. And you also get a little bit of the snare effect, but not the actual snare attack. So it's a really cool technique to take a loop and turn it into something completely different. I usually don't add the big loop thing until later. I try to keep it clean. Usually at this stage I will add some kind of clap. Let's see what we can find. It used to be great before I switched to OS 10 and Logic 7. I had whole folders with all these things in snares and hi-hats, but the way Apple wants you to do it is they want all the instruments in one folder and all the samples in another. So you have to follow this really complex structure to find everything. So these days it's easier to go back to, I save older projects and go back and get a clap or something like that from a mix I did recently. Let's see, we got a snare here, I think. Yeah, let's bring up that one. So same thing, and as you noticed, I still haven't glued these things together yet. I try to keep it open until I've decided exactly what I want to do. And it's the same thing, because I've edited these loops really tight, I've really checked everything that it's tight. And if you do that all the time, all the samples you use from other mixes are always tight as well. So there's never editing going on if you use your own sounds all the time. You know that everything I've done myself is tight. So you don't have to double check it even. It's always good to have kick, clap and hi-hats programmed, because then you're in charge of the production. If you base the whole thing on a loop, it's the loop that sort of decides where you want to go, and it can be really difficult. It's still possible here to, when you drop the loop, the track doesn't die. But if you use only a loop from another record, when you mute that, you got nothing. So I like to keep these elements programmed. And then something I learned quite recently, actually, it's an old, for live musicians, they know that you need rooms on drums because they're never completely dead. So I usually use a really short, like a room like that, not this much, but to get this little room feel. You can use it on the lighter kick as well. Well, you exaggerate it like this, and then you go back until you still hear it, but and if we mute it, you can hear it, even though it's a very little. It's a massive difference. So you get that sort of room, and the more stuff you put on, the better it gets. Because the drums are some drums should be dry, of course, but the percussive stuff, you put it in a dimension a little bit inside, and then you can try to make the mix wide, deep, and sort of bass and treble. You should try to use all dimension, really, pack it out. You can even put it on the closed. It gets a bit washy there, so you have to be careful with that one. I can even use it on the main loop here. This loop is a bit too busy for this, but it's more to prove a point. Yeah, so that's how I start, and I'll probably get a few more things, and then I'll start with the bass line. Always drum and bass first. And if it's a vocal mix, I will, at this stage, I will bring up the whole vocal and sort of program the beats around the vocal, if it's a full vocal production. And it's also a great technique to put the a cappella on with these simple drums and then sync up different records from your DJ setup. Because you never know, you might find a perfect groove from another record, and especially if you don't know exactly what you're gonna. Sometimes you have an idea. Okay, I'm gonna make a really dramatic mix with the vocal in the breakdown. Then you know what you're doing, and you go ahead. But I think it's important to try to create accidents, because that's always where the best results come from. When something happens, you drop the unexpected loop and it just really works, or a weird bass sound that sounds like shit when you listen to it like that, but it might sound great in the track.